So I want to talk really quickly about driving questions in PBL because the driving question is one of the most, if the not most essential piece of PBL. And the reason why is because the driving question is what the kids are actually doing. It's the problem that they're trying to solve. Without the driving question, a PBL cannot stand, there are no legs for it to stand on. I know that a lot of us are still kind of thinking in project mode. So we're creating guidelines for our kids to meet instead of centering the PBL around the driving question. So something to remember about guidelines, although structure is wonderful and there are ways to offer structure to students in a PBL, giving them guidelines is not the best way to do that, because the more you give them for them to do, the less they are going to give you in return. You want them to do all of this on their own, and we kind of feel like if we're not giving guidelines, we're not doing our job. But really, your job comes in planning the perfect driving question in PBL, and then once it's launched, you're teaching, facilitating, guiding, and offering structure in that way. So let's talk about good and bad PBLs. And I tried to remember some that we've actually done in some trainings or have gotten close to. But just remember that your driving question and an essential question are not the same thing. They can't be the same thing. Essential questions are good and maybe belong in the inquiry part of things in your phase 2, but the driving question is the problem. It's the obstacle that they're trying to overcome. And that's where I start when I plan a PBL. I start with my driving question first. Everything else kind of falls into place after I start with my driving question. So let's look at a few. Let me make sure I've got this where you can see. So here's not a driving question, because I can't really say all of these are essential questions because they may fall in a different place on the pyramid. They're just not driving questions. So this one, how can we create a poster to tell people about rocks and minerals? A lot of teachers want to make their product the driving question. How can we create a pamphlet? How can we create a poster? How can we create a map, or how can we do this or that? And the product should be different. Unless you're doing a design challenge, your kids should be choosing their own product. So you cannot make the driving question center around the product. Okay, so again, how can we create a poster to tell people about rocks and minerals? Not a driving question. Instead, my family went on a hike and they found these different rocks. How do I determine what these rocks are? That is actually a driving question because they have been presented with an obstacle. They've been presented with this thing that they have to figure out. So this is my standard. This is where it's coming from, the rocks and minerals. This is how we're making it a problem for them to solve. Okay, because again, you can pull problems from any and all of your standards. Uber advanced people at high school, y'all are a little different in some ways with that. Okay, another one. How can we explore the differences in social classes of the 1920s? So if you're reading something like The Great Gatsby, this may be relevant to you. And although that's a really good question that you are going to ask in your PBL, it should not be the driving question. Instead, as a middle-class friend of Daisy Buchanan in The Great Gatsby, I'm not sure how to dress and behave at a party I attend with her. How do I figure that out? So it may be that they choose another character and they're having to figure out how to navigate themselves socially since they're middle class and the character is upper class. How are they figuring that out? That's real life. It's an obstacle that they're having to figure out how to overcome and how to overcome it successfully. So that's where this becomes a driving question, and it's actionable. It's not broad, it's not vague. Okay, and then the last one, how can we create a brochure to advertise our new pet bakery? In parentheses, follow the teacher guidelines on how to use math with this packet involved. So I've seen lots of packets on Teachers Pay Teachers where it says that it's a PBL, but be very careful because 9 times out of 10, those are not PBLs. They can be used in a PBL, but they are not a PBL. Instead, using math and business marketing and etc., I have 13 customers in my neighborhood that want snacks for their pets. And you're assuming the role of the pet bakery owner. How do I figure out what ingredients I need for that many? So you're sending them in a direction where they're going to have to know enough about their business and enough about their product and how to make it and divide it up. This, for younger kids, they're going to be using fractions, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division here. So those are differences in questions that are just questions that you may want to ask along the way, and then driving questions. Again, with your driving question, number one, you have to have it. And number two, it has to be a problem or a challenge or an obstacle, something that they have to overcome and figure out. Their product reflects how they're doing that. And every kid is going to choose that in a different way. If you're putting it all on their plate, they're going to be engaged. If they know they have to figure out this problem and you're not giving them any guidelines telling them how to, they're going to figure it out. And you'll figure out the way that you can structure that along the way. If you have any questions, please invite me to your planning. Invite Ashley Potter to your planning. That's why we're here. We're making our way through the buildings trying to do training. Just let us know if you need any help.